Welcome to Slim Nation's One-on-One podcast with conversations featuring the host, James Slim Overton.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Slim Nation's One-on-One podcast. Of course, my name is James Slim Overton, and we are here this morning with a special guest, and her name is Barbara Goodridge. And let me bring her on there so you can see her. Yeah, Barbara. Good morning, Barbara. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well.
Yes, and Barbara is a longtime friend from the neighborhood here in Portsmouth, Virginia, called Acadia Heights, and then some we used to refer to it as Truxton, depending on where we were in the city. You know, sometimes you have to disguise where you're from because of the rivalries sometimes that used to be between the neighborhoods. So I used to say certain places, I'm from Acadia Heights, no one knew where that was, but uh, generally I would say from Truxton because everybody knew where that was. But anyway, Barbara is here this morning with us because we're going to talk a little bit about her experience going to a predominantly white high school in 65. Did I get that right, Barbara?
That's right. From
And 60.
65 to
So you,
69.
yeah, so re- imagine the climate around that time, 65, during probably the height of the civil rights movement, and a lot of things was going on. In the 60s, the late 60s, a lot of protests, approaching the 70s, where a lot of us became black and proud and started being aware of our blackness. And being in Virginia, sort of the northern part of the South, but and going to a predominantly white high school. Now, things weren't as bad as they were uh, um, early on in the years. Now, we probably hadn't too long gotten out of a, a massive resistance of blacks going to white schools. I know here in the city, in the Tidewater Hampton Roads area, there were some schools that protested where the parents didn't let their kids go to school. Maury was one of them over in Norfolk. And so that wasn't too far removed from the time that Barbara decided to go to Woodrow Wilson High School here in the city of Portsmouth. Now it was an effort to integrate our high schools, so they gave us an opportunity to choose to go to a predominantly white high school, which before that mostly all the black kids had to go to I.C. Norcom, one of the only predominantly black schools in the city of Portsmouth. But Barbara got a chance to go to Wilson, and we'll talk about her experience there, especially, as I mentioned, especially with the climate that was at that time. So, Barbara, uh, growing up, we grew up in the neighborhood and had most of the black neighborhoods back then were pretty much the same. You had the Truxton, the Acadia Heights, you had Mount Herman, you had plenty other black neighborhoods, and they were pretty much the same, self-sustaining neighborhood. Had just about everything you wanted in the neighborhood as far as service. Plumbers, painters, electricians, and everything. You had the candy ladies. You had pretty much. So we were pretty much self-contained, and as far as our needs, most of our needs. But we had to go outside of our communities for other things. But anyway, let's talk about growing up in the neighborhood, or a lot of times we have influences, or things happen, when you're growing up that sort of influence you to the point where uh, it kind of helps shape you into the person you are today. Did you have some of those influences, that helped shape you into who you are today? Because I know that Wilson experience was part of that education that you got, education outside the classroom that you got as far as that shape you who you are today. So talk about some of the, growing up, some of the influences or some of the things that happened along the way that started to impress you to the point that that you are who you are today.
Okay. Well, when you talk about our exposure, we were pretty much in communities where we didn't have a lot of interactions with people of other races, either because they didn't come to our neighborhood, so we didn't venture out. Actually, my journey in Portsmouth starts downtown on Glasgow Street. We lived in a duplex sandwiched between a Chinese joint and a bakery, Wood's Bakery. And then on the corner was Arnold's, which was we would call it a mini mart today because it was not as big as, for those of you who remember Belo's, but it was like the neighborhood place where you could go. People knew you, and they were pretty cooperative in terms of serving us. Um, so moving from downtown to my encounter with you and your crew on Pinewell Street, we were actually moving on up because on Glasgow Street in our duplex, we didn't even have running hot water. Um,
Wow.
my siblings and I joke and say we were so poor that we wanted to live in the projects. My mother says, "Are you crazy?" Because she knew what the system was like if you're getting help from the government and that kind of thing. So my father, who was a government worker, thank God, um, saved enough money to buy land, and that's how we ended up building a house on Pinewell Street. Now, for most people, if you tell them you're from Portsmouth, they say, "Oh, you must live in Cavalier Manor," because that's where the biggest group of us actually lived, middle class in terms of that. So I go back to Glasgow Street because I want to say that we did experience kindness from people that didn't look like us. The Mr. Wood at the bakery was very kind to us, and he would often give us excess um, pastries and things from his bakery. And I remember Mr. Arnold, the person who owned the store on the corner, he had a daughter that was a couple of years older than me, and she would sometimes give us um, some things that she no longer needed. I remember a pair of black and white shoes because back in the day, that was the in.
That was the thing.
That was the in. That was the in style.
Were they Buster Browns?
Nope, they were not Buster Browns, but they were good enough.
Okay.
So when it came time for us to choose a school, this was in 1965, and the word on the street was it was freedom of choice. You could go to any school you wanted to. And so I went to my parents and I negotiated a deal because prior to that, the legacy in our family was I.C. Norcom. And I have big ties with I.C. Norcom because Mr. Fears, the band director, is the one that introduced me to the saxophone. He taught me how to play the saxophone in summer band. And I kind of thought at that time, being at S.H. Clark, that I would be part of the Marching Greyhounds. But it didn't quite work out that way. So I went to them and said, um, I don't have a lot of interaction with white people, not in these terms, of course, but I said, I'd like to begin to see how they are. I'm going to need to be working in a white world, and I'd like to just become a little more comfortable being around them because didn't have a lot of encounters or interactions. And so they agreed to let me go. Then we had to figure out the logistics of how I would get there because we weren't on the normal bus route for pickup for children. But there was a teacher across the street, Mrs. Forbes, who taught at Mount Hermon. and she agreed to give me a ride to school. And that's how I got to Wilson every morning. Now, getting home was on my own.
Yeah.
Now, geographically, you know that it's walking distance, but I had to carry a saxophone, and I had done that 2 years at S.H. Clark. I didn't want to carry that saxophone from Woodrow Wilson back to Pinewell Street every day. But anyway, I managed. That was one of the things that was institutional transportation, because they gave us really a hard time with riding the bus because we weren't part of the normal school bus rotation. And so we had to use public transportation, which sometimes the bus drivers were nice about it and they accepted our bus tickets. Sometimes they weren't. We had to wait for another bus and had to just maneuver around that. But I began to um, see some of the cultural differences right away when I got to Wilson. Keep in mind that this is 1965. The Civil Rights Act had just been passed. I don't think that back then they got their faculty together and said, hey, we're going to have a change. Now we're going to have Black students coming. We need to have some diversity training. None of that was in the atmosphere. So when we got there, people turning around, looking at us, um, not wanting to sit beside us in the classes. There were some people that were kind, but in any society, you find decent people everywhere. And so I remember people helping me get to my class, because not even having been in the school before, you don't know where you're going and that kind of thing.
Now, Bob, let me ask you just right quick, because I kind of shared that experience. I went to Woodrow Wilson 1 year. I think it was 68 or 69 before I finished out at Northam, 3 years at Northam. And at 68 or 69, it was kind of, it was some tensions there in the air. It wasn't too bad, but some things happened, and I just can't imagine, taking it back to 65, because it seemed like when I was there, they weren't ready for us. It was mainly the teachers. They
Right.
weren't ready for us. And then you go back to 65, I mean, it had to be really raw. And then thinking 65, a lot of the students that went there at that time, most of them that volunteered to go there were athletes, because, if they couldn't make the Norcom team, because
Right.
you imagine every Black person in Portsmouth went to Norcom,
Right.
and guys got cut that could have started for any school. So Wilson was the option, was
Yep.
the audible in football terms, to go there and have an opportunity to play. But you chose after, and you've been talking about it, after experiencing Black schools all the way, even up to Clark. So most people, a natural progression from Clark was to Norcom, especially if you were a band student, because Clark's band, Stephen S. Clark band, was a feeder for Norcom's band, and it was just as good. When you saw them perform, they were just as good. So when they got to Norcom, they were ready. So I'm saying this to say too, probably you were a prize for Wilson's band coming there, and if they knew anything about Clark, the band director, he probably was glad to have you. But like you're saying, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I had to point out that experience that we both shared, but different times. But go ahead and continue on. I mean, with your assessment of your experiences there. I mean, how? I mean, I know you went through that phase, and everybody, well, can I touch your hair? Is your color gonna rub off on me? And I know it might sound crazy now to people watching, younger people watching, but they were just like you were learning. It was a learning curve for you. Some of them have never been that close to Black people. And it was amazing, the different texture of hair. All they've seen was what they saw on TV. And in '65, it wasn't a lot on TV.
It was limited.
That wasn't buffoonery. So continue your conversations. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I had to make that point there.
No, that's a good segue because it was strategic for the athletes. And I'm going to say that everyone didn't have the same experience. And definitely the athletes were more adored. They were more sought after. They were more utilized. And so they had a different experience. And I realized that. In terms of the band, because we didn't know how things worked, I was not even registered for a band class. So I had to, I talked to the band director. He was new to the school also. And we worked something out so that I would come to the practice room and I would get the music and I would practice on my own. And then I would join the band at their rehearsals after school and sometimes before school. So that's how that worked. Not knowing that there was actually a band class that I could have registered for, but my parents didn't know any of that. Like I say, the system works a little differently. And when you don't have someone that sort of looks after you, then these things sometimes fall through the cracks. So that was my experience the first year. My concept of what white life was going to be like at this high school was the same thing as you said, what I saw on TV. So I thought it was my three sons. Everybody gets along. There's a nice ending to every story. And much to my surprise, that's not how it worked. One thing that I recalled is I had a problem remembering who was in what class of mine because everybody looked the same, just about. There is a problem in law enforcement when you have a perpetrator and a victim. They sometimes can't easily identify each other because of the differences in races. And I found that was true. My first experience being in an all-white environment with so many people, they all looked alike to me. Mm-hmm. So you start to get to know people on an individual basis.
And vice versa.
Right. And so when they say we all look alike, I understand because they all looked alike to me too. Yeah. But like I said, there were always, God had always put somebody there to help me maneuver, and I was grateful for that. I remember, though, just the tension and the atmosphere. Coming from S.H. Clark was, they didn't let you get away with anything. They were truly preparing you for your future. And one of the things I remember seeing on a bulletin board once was strive not to emulate, but to excel. And I sort of tucked that under my armor. And I sort of felt back on that in a lot of cases when I saw that there was nothing to emulate in this environment. That actually, just looking back on those 4 years, they set me back rather than pushing me forward. S.H. Clark is the standard bearer, I say, for what prepared me for being in the world, being in corporate America, because they had high expectations and they didn't let you fall back on excuses. You had to be accountable, and all the things that corporate managers need to be successful, S.H. Clark provided. That could have been a training ground for future leaders, and a lot of cases that did prove to be true.
Was being at Wilson being pretty much on your own as far as disciplining yourself and knowing where you wanted to go and what you wanted to do? So you had to really push yourself. Of course, you had your parents at home that were pushing you and encouraging you to do well, to excellence. But, in the school setting, I can imagine. I don't know, and you will talk more about that as the years go, because you're in your second year. You know, you talk about S.H. Clark, and it was like that at Northam, having those teachers, encouraging you and demanding excellence and demanding you, to the point where we had to, almost dress up to go to school. You couldn't wear certain things. Ladies, girls had to have dresses, unless it was real cold, and then you had to get out of them to
Right.
pants.
Right.
So, but that ingredient was missing at Wilson as you continue your conversation. Am
Yeah.
I correct?
Right. Because I talk about the difference in culture. And one thing I'm going to point out that you can, actually, that's tangible. That is, if you look in the graduation books, we had drapes for our senior pictures, but my parents insisted that I go to Olin Mills and get a cap and gown picture because, see, we had to show proof that we graduated from high school. So we had a cap. We had to have a cap and gown, and I think in most households you'll find senior pictures with cap and gowns.
Yeah,
Not
I
with-
forgot about that. Yeah, in the yearbooks, most they just had a suit and
That's right,
right. Okay.
suit and tie, but that's not good enough for us.
No, no, we were used to that. That was like you said, proof.
Cultural difference. One,
Culture
one,
difference. Yes.
one of the things is the myth that the white schools were better, and that was true when you look in terms of technology or the physical things about the books and all of that. It may have been, but in terms of quality of life, I'm going to say that they were not as strict as we were. And I understood why in my household, why we did have to be strict, and just in our community, because you always taught that you had to be better. Not good enough was not good enough, that you had to be better and you had to strive to excel. I remember being in classes, and um, so the first year, freshman year, like most freshmen anywhere, you're learning the ropes. Um, I didn't get involved in anything other than band, but by sophomore year, I had been athletic in S.H. Clark, so I began to participate in sports. Um, I did track um, because I was always a fast runner, um, and got involved with some other intramural kinds of things. Was sort of like a spillover from having taken some gym classes and some semesters of different activities, and finding out about how things work. But you're right, I didn't have that feeling that there was anyone that was shepherding me through any of this. um, and we didn't have a I don't think there was any black teachers at that time in 65 on staff. Mrs. Mary Page, no, Mary Page is from Ebenezer. Um, but Mrs. Page came later. She came in my junior year. But let me talk about Mary Page, because the church was actually the stronghold and the foundation. Because after spending 5 days in an environment that was not receptive, um, I was a member of Ebenezer and involved in their youth group and programs. And that's where we really found some support, because not just support, but opportunities, opportunities to participate, to hold leadership positions, all the things that you were not getting in high school. Ebenezer had a way of allowing you to do things that helped to build your character more so than going to um, high school. And that may be the case for a lot of people too. Um, and I think churches know that. They know their role, whether you're at a black school or a white school. um, right across from Ebenezer's Fourth Baptist. Well, it's Fourth Baptist now, but at the time it was a white church community, and a lot of my classmates attended there, but we never interacted on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
During those 5 days, and that's part of the challenge America still has on Sunday morning. They say that's the most segregated time in American society is on Sundays. But thank God that there were some believers and some people, like I said, were kind to us. But freshman year, there was a lot of trauma and things that didn't even talk about for years.
Yeah, and you said trauma. Were they fights
Well,
or
I'm
mostly psychological?
not just psychological, but just not necessarily physical abuse, but a lot of verbal abuse. I
Which
was
could be
I
just
had
as bad,
I
just as
had
bad.
I had shared with my husband that for freshman year, every day I came out of my homeroom class. There was he was a short guy, and he would call me the N word every morning. Every morning. I I looked at him. Number one, his stature. He was small, so I figured he had a Napoleon complex to start.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And
And
no teachers checked him.
he would no, because he did it. It was undercover. He did it
Yeah,
out of the earshot of the teachers. So, but
dealing with your word against his.
yeah, and every morning, it's funny to me now because he put so much effort into it. He even made a little poem out of it that he thought was, creative. And he was in the band, and so I had to deal with him then and then, not knowing what he's going to do when we're in band rehearsal. But so that I just
Yeah.
when I
Barbara,
went.
saying that, what would you say? What was the percentage of black students at the time you were there? Because I'm thinking if it was more, it would have been more of a challenge for him to do that every day, especially if you're walking out of your class with one of the football players beside you, or behind you, or in earshot of that. That probably wouldn't have been as
Right.
prevalent every day.
There were about 10 of us in that freshman class. There were some seniors that had come. There were about, in that class of 65, I think there may have been about 4 or 5 seniors. So they'd come to spend their last year at Wilson. And then there were maybe 4 or 5 juniors who came. But overall, it was less than 20 blacks in a school of, I think, I can't remember how many what our population was at the time. But you're right. We were small in numbers. We didn't have a voice at all. Um, and I think we all knew that when we were forging this path, not really knowing what to expect, um, hoping for the best, but prepared in a way for some of the worst. And name calling, I had experienced name calling only once when I lived on Glasgow Street. And that was, I remember walking down Effingham Street, excuse me, because I went to Riddick Weaver,
Mhm.
and I was walking home to Glasgow Street, and this white girl, it was during the holiday season too. This white girl caught up with me, and she asked me, very friendly, did I know Silent Night? And I said, yeah. So we sang Silent Night, and we walked along peacefully. And then at the end, she called me the N word. I was just
What you said? Thanks,
flabbergasted.
Ian.
I
Thanks,
was
Ian.
like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I didn't know what to think. I'm like, so, but that I think in my psyche, it gave me sort of a mistrust of little white girls.
I can
But
imagine.
that was so funny. It's all funny to me now because I've gotten over it, and that takes me almost into my going to my class reunion. I went to my first class reunion in 2019. Now, I graduated in 1969, so that was actually the 50th year of the
Wow.
celebration. And that was quite by accident because someone saw my profile on Facebook online, and they were spearheading the committee, and they reached out to me. And I remembered her name. We never had any interactions, but I remembered her name. She was a cheerleader. And so, most people know the cheerleaders because they're out front.
Mhm.
And she had a twin. And so we began an exchange. And she told me about the reunion. That was the first time, even though my parents had been at the same address the whole time, no one ever reached out. Now, I know that there was an athlete that attended probably everyone. That's why I say everybody didn't have the same experience. Um, and I get it. And so
Yeah.
I can only speak to mine.
No one was calling the athlete the N-word to their face.
That's right, because they needed their skill set.
Right.
And so that would have been disruptive. Um, but so that had been a pivotal point with my relationship to my fellow classmates, because I had no desire to go to any of that. Now, uh, during my junior and senior years were better. Better meaning that you're a junior now, you're a senior. I knew to take journalism if I wanted to work on the newspaper, which I did, and I did that at S.H. Clark. And I kind of like knew a lot more than I did, and then there were a lot more of us, and then they began to bring some of the better teachers from IC Norcom over to Woodrow Wilson, and that's how I encountered Miss Page, who taught English, and she was a big relief, because you could go to Miss Page if you had problems. At least you had someone that could empathize, because
Right.
up to that point, if you brought up any issues, and I'm going to tell you, I had a couple of issues. One was in gym class, they would steal my gym clothes. I'd have to replace them. I'm still trying to figure out how they ended up getting into my locker,
Mm.
but they did. They managed to do that. And then for band, they stole my saxophone. Now,
Now,
my saxophone was
now,
not,
was it yours?
it
Did you
was
own that saxophone,
mine.
or was
Yes,
it a school issue? Oh,
no, I owned that saxophone. My parents had paid a pretty penny for that saxophone, and it wasn't the top of the line, so I know that it was a targeted theft. No, nobody else's instrument got stolen except my saxophone. And so everybody knew what that was all about. But my parents didn't know that you could sue the school and get a replacement. They just said, well, oh, well, you don't have a saxophone. I guess you won't be in the band. But no, I wanted to be in the band. So the school had a baritone sax that they said that if I was willing to play that, I could still be in the band. So I learned how to play the baritone sax. So that's two instruments I can claim I know how to play, right?
oh, okay. And the baritone sax is a little larger, or
Oh, it's a humongous, and to me, it was a monstrosity. But you got to weigh. You want to be with the band and go to the games and all of that, or So I chose to learn how to play the baritone.
yeah, okay.
It's also a different clef. There are two clefs in band. But
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
I
I've been in the orchestra. I'm familiar because
right,
I played cello, and we played on the bass clef,
right.
as opposed. But let me ask you this, Barbara. You're going to high school every day, and in a white environment, and you're coming home every day to a black environment. Now I can remember, where you lived, and we call it the circle at the
Mhm.
end of Pinewell. It was a dead end, but we never referred to it as a dead end.
It's a
Uh,
cul-de-sac.
yeah, it was a cul-de-sac, right, right. I don't think I knew that term
No,
then,
we
but
didn't.
but we never called it a dead end. But it was the hub of activity for the children there.
Yep.
And I had forgotten until you reminded me not too long ago that you went to Wilson, because it never was a thing like you would come home and we would say, oh, you think you this because you at the white school. That never was a thing. But I'm sure we knew you went to Wilson because or the people that were at Norcom at that time knew you weren't there. So, but how, we talk about code switching now, that you hear that term a lot, where in different environments you have to sort of
Right.
change the way you talk, but it doesn't lessen your intelligence. You just to better communicate sometime in different situations, you have to code switch. So, and that wasn't a term back then, but did you have to do anything like that, coming from Wilson? I guess you never lost your identity because you were at Wilson at that time. It wasn't enough time for you to lose your identity, because I can't remember you coming home and acting any different because you were there. I knew some people that did,
Well, let me say
think that they were better because they were going to Wilson, but that wasn't the case with you.
Actually, I.C. Norcom was the crown, and
Of course, yeah.
it was the gold standard. Going to Wilson was actually a step down. So there was nothing to boast about. There was nothing really to boast about. The band was not as good. They were good, but
their marching style was different. They had that core marching style, and it wasn't as entertaining as the high stepping.
No, it wasn't. It was different. Another cultural difference. Okay. Yeah. Another cultural difference. So we had to downplay a lot of things that we had learned from S.H. Clark Band.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, other than learning how to play the baritone sax, I didn't really learn any new musical concepts, theories, or any of that, because that wasn't what was happening with the band. And some of the music was, we played grade 6 music at S.H. Clark because we were, like you say, we were a feeder for the I.C. Norcom team. And every summer, Mr. Fears would have a workshop, and we were just ready to just go slide into place once you got to I.C. Norcom.
Yeah, Bob, I had an interview with a Norcom band director, Kevin Davenport, and he talked about the grade 6 that and once you committed to that, when you went to those festivals, you got graded. If you're going to play grade 6 music, that's the way you're going to be graded. And some schools might go in there with the notion of playing grade 6, and they would get graded. If they weren't up to that standard, then they wouldn't get the 1s or the 2s that they thought they might get. So once you committed to it, which was I think was the highest step, was a really step up in your musicality, as far as the band.
Right.
And so once you committed, you had to deliver. I'll put it that way. And y'all were playing grade 6 at Clark?
S.H. Clark, absolutely.
Because of Fields.
Absolutely. And Jenkins.
And Jenkins, yeah. Charles Jenkins was the band director.
They were excellent. And that's where my love for music happened, and love for all kinds, all genres.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that we played this composition called The Great Gate of Kiev. And, Kiev, Ukraine is now in the news.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about Kiev back at S.H. Clark.
Right.
Okay.
So being in the band was also a history lesson.
It was a holistic approach to life and to the arts. And it was just a great experience. Like I said, if I could replicate S.H. Clark back in those days, we'd have a great system. We'd have a system of educated, informed, and cultural society.
Let me ask you this, and we often talk amongst ourselves that went to Norcom, that the history lessons that we got as far as Black history, we got some of it, but we didn't get a lot. We knew about Booker T. Washington, George Washington Carver, and some of the other people that were prevalent as far as taught to us because of the curriculum in the city of Portsmouth wasn't controlled by us. It was controlled, by usually an all-white school board or administration. So when you at Wilson, how much history did you get, concerning Black contributions, if any, in your history class? Did they slip some of that in? Some of it had to be in the books.
But yeah, well, it was minimal. I'm going to go back to my, I think it was fifth grade Virginia history, when the books that were being used said that there was slavery in Virginia, but the slaves were happy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I thought to myself, how could you be a slave and be happy?
Happy.
So
Even in the fifth grade, you could figure that out.
That was the book that everyone was using in the Portsmouth public school system.
Yes.
And remember in 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated, and people were going around saying they're happy. It was such a emotional time for us.
They didn't even try to disguise it, huh?
No, they did not. And then when George Wallace was running for president, it was terrible times then too, where people were just showing their stuff. It's almost like we're reliving those times again in the 21st century. Segregation now, segregation forever. They never wanted us. And then to have to sit through classes where people are expressing their personal views about race and what's happening in the news, and having to sit there. And I'm thinking, it's not in the book. And this is not what we're supposed to be learning. And that's why I say I didn't learn a lot during my time at Wilson. Most of what I learned was at S.H. Clark, and it just needed to have been expanded because it's such a different environment.
It's funny how things come full circle. It's named after Woodrow Wilson, and recently, when they renamed Manor, Manor came up and they changed it to Wilson because they wanted to close Wilson, and then they recently renamed Manor and took the Wilson and name off the school, which was made easier because of the information that people knew about Woodrow Wilson and his racist views, that he was a stone cold racist.
Right.
And so it made him easier, for most people. And thank goodness we had a predominantly Black school board that had to make that decision. But I don't know if the time would have been, if it wasn't that way, if that decision would have been made anyway because of the support from the communities. But did you know at the time when you were at Wilson, how about Woodrow Wilson, the president?
Well, not in terms of his political views in terms of race and racism, just what we were taught, that he was a great president and we should be proud that we go to a school that's named after this great president. I want to make a comment. It's an observation.
Sure.
And I think that in the Norfolk Portsmouth area, and I'm going to say the surrounding areas as well, one thing that has made me quite pleased, and that is there's a strong alumni at IC Norcom. The alumni were people who said, no, we're going to keep the name, we're going to keep the history, even though they shorten it to Norcom so that they can kind of disguise it. The same thing they did with changing the name of S.H. Clark as Stephen Academy. They do that. And also Booker T. Washington in Norfolk. Those are the only two schools that if you went there in 65, you can still go back and say, well, that the school existed, because most places the schools no longer exist. If you look at Chesapeake, and there's no Crestwood, there's no Suffolk, um, that kind of thing. So it's because of strong alumni. And part of that, I think I read someplace where back in the 50s, a lot of people who graduated from Norcom, and that was our parents and grandparents, not my family, but just people I know, that after high school, they didn't go to college. They didn't go to college. So coming back to a place meant home. And so that's why they had such strong feelings about keeping that name, maintaining their history. You know, as years went on, of course, people went off to college and that kind of thing. But just strong alumni,
Yeah.
just exceptional alumni.
And Barbara, as a note, it's a group now, and that are organizing a Woodrow Wilson alumni,
Hmm.
and the organizers are Black, and they are a lot of Wilson people I talked to that came later, much later after you, are proud of being Wilson presidents, and I can understand that because that was their school, and as time went on, it wasn't a choice. I mean, in certain neighborhoods, especially Mount Hermon,
Right.
um, and you was zoned to Wilson, so that was your school. So you didn't know anything else but that. So you went there, and I think a lot of things that had improved. It was more Black faculty, and some sympathetic white faculty, and so a lot of changes. Horace Savage, who was a longtime coach at IC Norcom, was assistant principal there. So a lot of those kids were proud of being a Wilson president. So they are starting their alumni association with the help of some people from the IC Norcom alumni, uh, helping them get started. And I'm curious to see as it goes on, will it be a mixed alumni? Will some of the whites, which I think probably will, especially the later classes, will probably jump on board and be a part of it. So that's going to be interesting to see how that develops. I think they saw the formula of what's going on at Norcom, and
Right.
how that's how proud we are and how much we're giving back to the school, and they wanted to do the same thing and give out scholarships and things like that. They no longer have the school, but they can be active. So that's just a side note. That was a long time coming, but you're right. The alumni at Norcom and is kind of unique for a high school, because you go to our homecomings now, the tailgates is almost like a college experience.
Uh, I was thinking that in 67, there were three blacks in the band. Um, I was one of those three. And then I was at a homecoming in the 70s, and it was almost like it was three whites in the band.
Yeah, that
I'm like, is that,
those
did I
numbers
see,
had
did I see that
completely turned
sound right?
around
Did
by
that see
then.
Woodrow Wilson? But
Yeah.
it had turned around. I'm like, oh, yeah, this is a great time to be in the band. I want to fast forward to the 50th reunion because, again, once I made a decision, and I have been in communication with some of my class of 1969, trying to get us together. It's um, it's still a notion because I haven't done that next action to make it a true project.
Hmm.
But when the 50th came up, I did reach out to a few of them to see if they would, you know, join me, meet me at that reunion. No one was interested. So I had to decide, did I want to go? So I made a decision. My husband and I went. And this is after talking to, her name is Patsy Southard, Patsy Noble Southard. I give that woman a lot of credit for reaching out and following up. of course, when we got there, they were very welcoming, and I realized that a lot of our attitudes about race comes from our parents and from the times in which we lived in our society at the time. So I didn't know what to expect, but they were quite welcoming, and to the point that my husband says they're treating you like you're a rock star, and I said they're just happy that I showed up.
Yeah. And they
So
probably, over the years, as they grew, they probably learned to respect the position that you were in at that time and said, wow, I
not so,
probably couldn't have done that. They
not.
probably couldn't have done that at Norcom.
Let me say this: they two things about that. One is my husband looked around and he says, "Do you realize we're the only black people in the place?" And I said, "Welcome to my world." In 1965. Okay.
Right, right.
So the other thing was, I had a chance to talk to them because, again, the question is, why aren't there more blacks? And I had to break it down to them and say, you have no idea what we went through, and nobody was interested in coming back to reminisce about what was not
About
4 good years for them. 4 good years of just managing to just stay above water, to just
Mhm.
go every day and put up with the tension and blah blah blah, as my brother says. But uh, Patsy gave me an opportunity to talk about what my experiences had been, and her reaction was that she had no idea that we were going through that, and that if they had known, they would have reacted differently. But we're all kids. We all, I understand that you're a product of your um, you're a product of your environment most of the time. And that was what was happening in society, and people were just in their own lanes, not concerned about you, because they got to be concerned about their own insecurities and what they're going through as students and that kind of thing. But she did share my stories with some people, because even some of the band members didn't realize that my instrument had gotten stolen, so they were very empathetic and reassuring. So it was a great welcoming. It was like we had grown up, and
Mhm.
it was just very moving. And as a matter of fact, she sent me a touching email that talked about her experiences. I'm not going to read that email because I didn't get her permission
Mhm.
to read it, but it almost brought me to tears. And I was just happy that she extended an apology for, Wilson. And, I understood her perspective as a naive student. And so it was all good. I did end it by telling them that I was on the 50-year plan and that I would be back the next 50 years because the time. Now, on that first night, it was just us. On the second night, another black student in our class did come, and I was happy to see her and her husband. And so that was two of us, two of us out of the class. But it's all good. It's
Yeah.
all good. I have forgiven them. I have gotten over it. And God had to work with me on my own um, prejudices. And it started with me moving to a community. I'm in Columbia, Maryland, and that was for those who know about these things, it's a Jim Ross vision. He had a vision that all different kinds of people could live together in a community,
Mhm.
and that's where I ended up. And I've got some great neighbors. My sons have made great friends. They're all grown and adults now, and I even have people that don't look like me in my family, and we love them. But that's how God had to deal with me in my own personal. He had to put it in my face.
Yeah, you couldn't help but have some kind of feelings about that experience you had there. But look, and we're winding down to an hour, but it's two things I want to get in here before we close out. And one of the things is, okay, you graduated from Woodrow Wilson, and you end up going to Norfolk State University, which is HBCU. Didn't call it that then, but HBCU. Was there any thoughts of you continuing, that Wilson experience and going to a PWI,
Oh
or
no,
were you
oh
focused
no.
on? You say, I'm ready to
I
go
was,
back
I
to.
was done. I knew I had to go to a black college. I knew it for my sanity.
Yes,
And
yes,
also, the social life too. It's
right.
different, and I wanted to experience college and in its fullest form. So it had to.
Yeah, because you were outgrowing us in the neighborhood, so you wasn't. We were neighbors, so couldn't have a lot of social life with us. So it was time to
Yeah,
to elevate to that
well,
different type of social life and that black experience again.
absolutely. And
Mhm.
Norfolk State, once again, it was much like S.H. Clark. They had a slogan: "They have to let you in, but they don't have to let you out until you're ready."
Yeah, they used
That
to
is,
say it's
that is
easy to get
true.
in, but hard to get out of Norfolk State. But
That's right. But but
which
but they when you're out, that you are prepared.
yes. Well, and you mentioned earlier about S.H. Clark and how that prepared you for a lot of things later on in life. And it was that a combination of that and then Wilson and then Norfolk State, and you put all that together because even though the Wilson experience wasn't the greatest, but you had to take away some things from that in combination with Clark and Norfolk State that really prepared you for your working career or just dealing with life in general? Or was Wilton a non-factor in that?
Oh, it was definitely a factor. One thing was my perception of white society in the real world, and that is that you find all kinds of people, good, bad, evil, um, and that changed because, like I said, I thought that everything had a good ending watching TV, and that was not the case. I also think that, as we know, the standards are a little higher when you go to a black institution because it's a subculture of a larger society, and people still look at you as not as necessarily as an individual, but as a class, and so you do always have to put your best foot forward. So yes, it did have an impact. I became a lot more comfortable being in settings where I was a minority, and that did help me, um, you know, throughout my career.
And you started your career right here in the Hampton Roads, or what we call back then Tidewater area. Uh, where?
I did. At Norfolk State. I was part of Teacher Corps, which prepared you to teach. You're specializing in being creative and presenting things a little differently for inner city schools. And then I went to work for the telephone company.
Mhm.
An interesting story about that. We lived on Glasgow Street. At the corner of Effingham and High was the telephone company.
Yeah.
Every day I walked by there, I said to myself, I want to work for the telephone company. Now, at that time, the only thing I knew about was operators.
Hmm.
But when I had an opportunity to work for the telephone company, I took it. A friend
After a
of
part of that dream that you had every day.
It
Well,
was it. Listen, they had no idea that I'd always wanted to work. It wasn't smooth sailing getting in. There was a little delay in me being hired, um, but that's a story for another day,
another day.
another podcast. But I did, and I did have a successful career with the telephone company, and so I'm pleased about that.
So
Now,
how did you end up in Maryland?
um, I married this man who was in retail, and he got transferred.
Oh, okay.
This is my second time living in that area. My only requirement the second go round was not to live or work any place that had to do with the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. They've since remedied that, but at that time it was like, oh no, it doesn't matter what time you get up, it's still going to be a hassle to get across that bridge. And
Wow, that tells me that you got your diploma, but that really wasn't the greatest experience. Well, I guess we heard that throughout your commentary here. So, but things. I believe most things happen for a reason, and that probably was an experience. Even though you had older brothers and sisters and a younger brother that was graduated with me at IC Northam, and a younger sister who went to Craddock, I believe.
she did.
Another predominantly white school, but it probably was more integrated by the time she went there.
And it was her assigned school.
Yeah, it wasn't by choice,
Right. Right.
But
And
yeah,
by then things had relaxed a little. Now you've got a group of people that may have started out being integrated from first grade through ninth grade. And so it wasn't a big deal sitting beside Black kids in the classroom.
wow. So I want to thank you for coming on and telling us your story. And I think I was going to say a lot of people probably had that same experience, but when you were there, wasn't too many of you there. And I can tell by what you said, contacting some of the other Blacks to come back, they were not interested. I don't want to relive that experience, but like you said, that was a part of your growth, to get you where you are today. So I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your story, and hopefully we'll have you back for other subjects that we talk about here on my other show, Portsmouth Coffee Talk, and the Slim Nation 101's podcast. So we can get into your work career. I guess that could be just as interesting, as you talked about how difficult it might have been to get into the telephone company. But anyway, look, give a shout out to your mother who still lives in the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, I'm still in the neighborhood. I came back and I'm in the house that I was raised in, a few houses from where your mother is, and she's still there. One of the few original residents that are still her and Miss Clark.
That's
I
right.
think are the only two.
Yep.
We just lost another original.
Yeah.
But
now we're getting into second generations.
yeah, second generation.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
we had quite a few. Two of the Smith girls are back in the neighborhood. Been back in the neighborhood for a while. So many of us have come back. But shout out to your mother. Give a shout out to your mother who's
Hey,
still
Mom.
there and active
Mom,
in our civic league.
So I have to tell you, I hadn't talked about my experience going through 4 years of Wilson, because when you asked me what was it like coming home, you don't complain at my house. You wanted to go, we let you go.
Yeah.
And it's a done deal. So
Yeah.
anything you have to cope with, you need to cope. You need to handle it.
Yeah.
But,
You made that choice.
But that's right. And so what you start, you got to finish. So it wasn't I could bail out after that first year. But I have to say that my mother and I talked about this, years later. It must have been in the 80s.
Uh-huh.
We never talked about it, but she talked about how she didn't like going to the band parents meetings and how it made her feel.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a chance to just, go over that and
air it out.
Release some of that pin up. But my parents were very supportive, I must say. And like I say, they allowed me to make a decision and they allowed me to grow up. And I appreciate that.
And the last thing, how was that in the household with your brothers and sisters? You were Wilson and Linda and George had gone to, was either one of them at Northam at the time you were at Wilson?
My brother George. But
George probably was, yeah.
But I'm a middle child.
Oh, okay.
So I have to put up with a lot of things.
Oh, yeah. The middle child catches it.
But like I said, Northam was the place to be. And I attended so many activities at Northam. They used to have the Fine Arts Festival, a night of art, music, and drama. And so most of my activities were not at Wilson; they were at Norcom.
Yeah.
And I had the chance to go to the 50th reunion of the class of '69 for IC Norcom, and everybody thought that I had gone to IC Norcom. They remembered me from S.H. Clark, not realizing I was not there those 4 years.
Yeah, because I mean, because we had classes of 400 and 500 people. So I'm still learning people that graduated with me that I didn't actually know that they were there, you know. So you can go through 4 years and not know something. They might have known you or somebody you knew that didn't know you. So it was a lot. You're not the only ones. A lot of other people that we thought went to Northam because they were at everything Norcom, but they actually went to Wilson or Craddock, you know,
Right.
or Churchill.
But I thank God for the experience because, he uses everything that you've gone through
Oh yes,
to
indeed.
help someone else. So I have no complaints. I would like to do a public service announcement.
Sure, go ahead.
One of the things that I have been doing is working with Jacqueline Palmer. She's a officer at Strayer University,
Mhm.
and she is looking to identify those persons that are interested in justice. And she has the responsibility of getting scholarships for people it's called Fellows for Justice, and it's at Strayer University. You can go to their website and get more information. But those people that are interested in the community and certain areas, if you're interested in accounting, business administration, criminal justice, and IT, they do have scholarships available. If you're involved in your community and you're looking for a way to pay for college for your first bachelor's or master's degree, Strayer University gives away 50 scholarships. They've been doing this since 2020, and they're looking for people to give these scholarships to. So if that fits you and you're ready to begin school, then go to their website, Strayer University, Fellows for Justice Scholarships, and get the details.
Okay, thank you. That's great information. It's always good to know what opportunities or what options are out there for students that want to further their education. So thanks for that, Barbara. And again, thanks for coming on. And look, we'll see you next time. And
Okay. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, and behold the green and gold. I'll get that
Amen.
to you.
Yes.
All
right.
For real, the maroon and steel of Virginia Union. I had to add that in there. It's all good, though. It's all good.
Right. It's all good.
Yes. Take care. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.
Okay. You too.
All right.